It just aired, 3 words no radio station on earth is ever supposed to say by accident. The king is dead. For a few seconds, nobody in the studio moved. Then the national anthem started playing. Somewhere in the United Kingdom, a man was sitting behind a studio computer, doing nothing more dramatic than routine maintenance. He found 3 audio files nobody was ever meant to touch without direct authorization. Files prepared, in advance, for the day King Charles III actually dies. And out of nothing more than curiosity, he pressed play. What happened in the next 30 minutes would end up in an official report from Britain's broadcasting regulator. It would terrify a radio presenter mid-show. It would send one member of staff running out of the building in a panic, and it would raise a question that Buckingham Palace has spent decades trying to control. What actually happens the moment a monarch dies? This is the story of the day King Charles III's death was announced on British radio, except he hadn't died at all. Let's go back to where this really begins. Not in 1981, not with Charles's wedding, not even with his coronation. It begins with a plan, a secret one. For generations, the British establishment has operated on a simple, uncomfortable truth: the monarch will die someday, without warning if the public is unlucky. And when that day comes, there can be no scrambling, no confusion, no dead air. So broadcasters across Britain quietly prepare for it. Every major station keeps something in reserve. A folder, usually locked, usually named something deliberately unremarkable so nobody stumbles onto it by accident. Inside, pre-written statements, sometimes pre-recorded audio, ready to be broadcast the moment official confirmation comes through from the palace. It is, by design, one of the most tightly controlled protocols in British media. Presenters are briefed, engineers are briefed. There are instructions, strict ones, about who can access these files and under what circumstances. Nobody plays them for fun. Nobody plays them just to see. That was the theory anyway, because on the 19th of May, this careful, decades-old system very nearly collapsed. On a small independent station most casual listeners had never given a second thought to. Its name, Radio Caroline. Now, for anyone under 60 listening to this, that name might not mean much, but for a British audience who lived through the 1960s, Radio Caroline carries weight. It began life as a pirate station, literally broadcasting from a ship anchored off the English coast, dodging British broadcasting law to get pop music onto the airwaves at a time when the BBC simply wouldn't play it. Decades later, it survived, evolved, went legal, became a small but beloved fixture of British radio, run with real affection by people who'd grown up idolizing it, which makes what happened next feel almost cruelly ironic. Because on that Tuesday in May, Radio Caroline was running one of its regular programs, The Barry Marsh Show. Ordinary, familiar, the kind of show long-time listeners tune into out of habit as much as anything else. Barry Marsh himself wasn't even in the studio that day. He was broadcasting remotely, streaming his voice into the station from somewhere else entirely, while a colleague handled things from the physical studio. And it was in that studio, quiet, ordinary, utterly unremarkable, that someone sat down to do a bit of routine maintenance on a computer. Nothing glamorous. The kind of technical housekeeping that happens behind the scenes of every radio station, every single day, without anyone listening ever noticing. Except this time, while poking through the system, this staff member found something they were never meant to find unsupervised. 3 sound files. Pre-recorded, ready, waiting, prepared, specifically, for the day King Charles III dies. According to the broadcasting regulator's later report, these files came with clear conditions attached. A set of strict instructions for presenters, for managers, about exactly when they could ever be played. This was not a maybe. This was not a use your judgment. This was one of the most sensitive pieces of content a British radio station can possess, and the member of staff who found it did something almost unthinkable. They played it anyway, not out of malice, not as a prank aimed at listeners. According to the station's own account, given afterward to the regulator, the reason was almost disarmingly human: curiosity. Nothing more calculated than that. They wanted to know what was on those files, so they pressed play, and the moment they did, something they clearly did not expect happened. It didn't just play quietly to them, alone, in the studio. It cut the presenter's remote stream and broadcast live out across the airwaves to every single person listening to Radio Caroline at that exact moment. Somewhere out there, in kitchens and cars and living rooms across Britain, ordinary listeners, tuned in for nothing more than a bit of familiar mid-morning radio, suddenly heard something else entirely. A statement declaring that King Charles III was dead. The words hit the airwaves before anyone in that studio could stop them. Then, something almost surreal followed, the national anthem, playing, in full, as if this were real, as if, somewhere in London, flags were already being lowered. For any listener who has lived through the death of a monarch before, that combination is unmistakable. Statement, then anthem. It's the exact sequence Britain uses when the news is genuine, which meant, for those first stretched out seconds, it didn't sound like a mistake at all. It sounded like history happening, live, on the radio. Then it happened again. A second version of the statement played, and then a third, each one escalating slightly. According to the regulator's later findings, one of these statements went even further than simply announcing a death. It claimed the news had already been confirmed by the media itself. Think about that for a moment. Not just the king has died, but this has already been verified. It's real. It's out there. For any listener who'd only just tuned in mid-broadcast, with no context, no warning, there was nothing to suggest this was anything other than the single biggest news story of the decade, breaking live on their car radio. And then, just as suddenly as it started, silence. Not a graceful fade, not a smooth handover back to the presenter. Dead air. For listeners tuning in through digital radio, the silence stretched on for roughly 16 minutes. 16 minutes after being told their monarch had died. Meanwhile, oddly, listeners on the older AM frequency heard something completely different. Music, carrying on, as if nothing had happened at all. Two versions of the exact same radio station, broadcasting two completely different realities at the exact same moment. One in morning, one in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday playlist. Now here's where the story turns from strange to genuinely tense. Because back in that studio, the staff member who'd pressed play finally realized the scale of what they'd just done. This wasn't a private curiosity anymore. It was live, broadcast, public. According to the station's own account, the moment the reality of the situation hit them, they stopped the files. And then, they panicked and walked straight out of the building, left the studio, left the equipment running, left the entire unfolding crisis behind them. Think about the position that left everyone else in. Because remember, the actual host, Barry Marsh, wasn't even there. He was streaming in remotely, from somewhere else entirely, completely unaware that anything had gone wrong at all. He was, at that exact moment, on a phone call. Utterly disconnected from the fact that his own show had just told the country the king was dead. It gets worse before it gets better, because somebody, somewhere, had to notice, and somebody had to fix it. Eventually, word reached Marsh. He broke off his call, contacted an engineer at the station, trying to understand what on earth had just gone out over the air. The confirmation came back quickly, and it was almost unbelievable in its simplicity. Yes, it happened. The king's death files, played by mistake. Now imagine sitting in that presenter's chair. You come back on air, knowing full well that somewhere out there, real people, ordinary listeners, driving to work, doing the shopping, half listening in their kitchens, genuinely believe, for now, that the King of the United Kingdom has died, and you have to fix that, live, in real time. It took roughly 30 minutes from the moment the false announcement first aired for Marsh to get back on the microphone and address it directly. His words, according to later reporting, were simple and just a little shaken. He told listeners that some incorrect information had gone out earlier, that he hadn't heard it happen himself, that it was, in his words, a technical issue, and that the station was sorry. No panic in his voice by that point, just the flat, controlled tone of someone trying to undo 30 minutes of chaos with a single calm sentence. But here's the question that should be sitting with you right now. How many people heard that first announcement and never heard the apology at all? How many people picked up their phones in that gap and started texting family, started searching for news confirmation, started, in their own small way, grieving? Because this would not be the first time false word of a royal death has spread through Britain and beyond. Just 2 years earlier, pro-Kremlin channels in Russia had pushed out a fabricated statement, dressed up to look exactly like an official Buckingham Palace release, claiming Charles had died overnight. It reached Ukraine. It reached Azerbaijan. British officials were forced to publicly, urgently deny it. Facebook has seen its own version too. AI-generated images of the king in a hospital bed, paired with invented claims that his reign had already ended. Each time, the palace and British officials have had to step in and calm the story down, but this time was different. This wasn't a shadowy disinformation campaign from overseas. This wasn't an anonymous account on social media chasing engagement. This came from inside a real, licensed, legitimate British radio station, using files the station itself had prepared for the real thing, which meant this story wasn't going to quietly disappear once the apology aired. Somebody was going to ask how this happened, and somebody, eventually, was going to have to answer for it. That somebody was about to be Radio Caroline itself. Word travels fast in British broadcasting, and word of this traveled faster than most. Because the moment those files went out live, complaints started coming in. Not dozens, not hundreds, just 2, according to official records. But it only takes one complaint to the right regulator to open the door to a full investigation. That regulator is called Ofcom. For anyone unfamiliar, Ofcom is the organization responsible for policing every licensed broadcaster in the United Kingdom. Radio, television, all of it. And when it comes to reporting the death of a sitting monarch by mistake, this falls squarely, unmistakably into their territory. So Ofcom opened a case. They requested Radio Caroline's own account of what happened, internal explanations, timelines, the station's own admission of exactly how those files ended up on the air. And piece by piece, the picture came together. A staff member performing routine maintenance, files that should never have been accessible without direct authorization, a moment of unsupervised curiosity, and a live broadcast interruption that told the entire country their king had died. Ofcom's findings didn't paint this as some reckless publicity stunt. There was no suggestion of malice, no suggestion anyone wanted to cause panic on purpose. But that, in a strange way, made it more unsettling, not less. Because if a mistake this serious could happen through nothing more than idle curiosity on a quiet Tuesday during routine computer maintenance, then how many other stations across Britain are sitting on files exactly like these right now? Ready, waiting, one careless click away from going out live. Now, to really understand why this mattered so much to Ofcom, you need to understand just how seriously Britain takes the moment a monarch actually dies. Longtime viewers of royal history will already know the broad outline. The plans have existed, in various forms, for decades, detailed, layered, coordinated between the palace, the government, and every major broadcaster in the country. The instant an announcement is confirmed, an extraordinarily precise sequence begins. Formal notices, flags lowered, church bells, national television and radio coverage shifting almost instantly into solemn, coordinated morning coverage. It is designed to be dignified, controlled, utterly unmistakable in its authenticity. Which is exactly why broadcasters keep pre-prepared statements ready in the first place. Because when that day genuinely comes, there is no room for hesitation, no room for a presenter fumbling for words live on air while the nation waits. But that entire system depends on one single, unbreakable rule. Those files must never, under any circumstances, go out until the moment is real. And for around 30 minutes, on a Tuesday in May, that rule broke. Ofcom's ruling ultimately found that Radio Caroline had breached its broadcasting code, specifically, the rules governing accuracy, and just as importantly, the rules requiring broadcasters to correct significant mistakes quickly and clearly once they happen. Now, here's where the story takes an unexpectedly human turn. Because reading through the regulator's own account of events, there's a detail that quietly stands out. Something almost sympathetic buried inside an otherwise serious breach of broadcasting standards. The staff member who played those files didn't try to hide what they'd done. They didn't deny it. They didn't blame a technical glitch or claim ignorance. According to the station's own explanation, once they realized the scale of what had happened, they were, in their own words, panicked. Panicked enough to stop the files immediately. Panicked enough to walk straight out of the building. Think about what that moment must have actually felt like. 1 second, mild curiosity about some files. The next, the horrifying realization that you've just told the entire country the monarch has died. Live, broadcast, irreversible in the sense that it had already reached however many thousands of listeners in that window. There's no walking that back quietly. For 30 full minutes, that mistake existed in the world, completely unresolved, while the person responsible was already gone from the building. Meanwhile, Barry Marsh, the actual host, remember, broadcasting from somewhere else entirely, was left to pick up the pieces of a crisis he hadn't caused and hadn't even witnessed. He had to trust secondhand information, confirm the scale of the mistake through an engineer, and then go back on air to a national audience and calmly explain that no, the king was not dead, and yes, this was entirely their own station's error. It's worth pausing here to ask a bigger question, one that goes beyond a single radio blunder. What actually would happen if a false announcement like this had spread further? Radio Caroline is a relatively modest station, beloved, certainly, with real historical weight behind its name, but not a broadcaster with the reach of, say, the BBC. Imagine instead this exact same mistake happening on a station with millions of live listeners. Add in modern social media, where a single screenshot, a single video clip of the broadcast can spread across the world within minutes. We've already seen how quickly false royal death rumors can travel even without any real broadcast behind them. Fabricated Kremlin-linked statements, AI-generated hospital images, viral posts claiming the monarchy had already ended. Each of those spread purely on speculation and fabrication. Now imagine that same rumor, but with actual audio, from an actual licensed radio station, followed by the actual national anthem. That's not a rumor anymore. That's something that sounds, to an untrained ear, exactly like the real thing. This is precisely why Ofcom didn't treat this as some minor technical footnote, because the danger here wasn't really about one small station's internal error. It was about what that error revealed, about just how fragile the barrier really is between prepared for the worst and broadcast by accident. A barrier that, in this case, came down to nothing more than a locked folder and a moment of very human curiosity. Ofcom's official report was released to the public on a Monday, several months after the incident itself. 4 pages, methodical, almost clinical in tone, laying out, statement by statement, exactly how a king's death came to be announced, when he was, in fact, very much alive. And Charles himself? By the time that report became public, the king had been carrying on with his usual, demanding schedule of official engagements, entirely unaware or entirely unbothered, depending on how you read the silence from the palace. Because notably, there is no public record of Buckingham Palace issuing any official statement responding to this specific incident at all. No outrage, no formal complaint from the palace itself, which, in its own quiet way, tells you something about how these things are handled behind closed doors. But for Radio Caroline, the fallout was far from over, because being found in breach by Ofcom is one thing. What happens next, the reprimand, the changes, the lingering reputational shadow over a station that survived pirate radio raids, legal battles, and decades of change. That story was only just beginning. So what actually happens to a radio station once Ofcom rules against it? For a lot of listeners, this is the part that surprises them most. There was no fine, no station shut down, no license revoked, just a formal reprimand, a public finding of breach, the station's name, permanently, attached to one of the strangest false death broadcasts in modern British radio history. But don't mistake that for a light punishment. Because for a station like Radio Caroline, reputation isn't a side detail, it's the entire foundation of who they are. Remember, this isn't some faceless corporate broadcaster with a dozen stations and a legal department to absorb the hit. This is a station whose entire identity is built on trust, on nostalgia, on decades of loyal listeners who grew up with it fighting from a ship in the North Sea, defying the establishment just to get music on the airwaves. And now, its name sits permanently inside an official government report. For accidentally telling the country the king had died, according to Ofcom's findings, the breach came down to two specific failures. First, accuracy, the most basic responsibility any broadcaster carries. Don't tell your audience something false. Second, and just as important, the requirement to correct serious mistakes quickly and clearly once they happen. Remember, it took around 30 minutes for Barry Marsh to even get back on air and address what had gone out. 30 minutes, during which anyone who'd heard that first broadcast and hadn't stayed tuned in was simply left believing it. Some of them, almost certainly, went and told someone else. A family member, a neighbor, someone at work. That's the real, quiet danger buried inside this story. It's not really about Radio Caroline's technical failure. It's about how easily a piece of information, even a false one, can outrun its own correction. By the time Marsh's apology went out, the story had already left the building, already reached ears that would never hear the follow-up. And once something like that is out there, you cannot fully call it back. Now, let's return to the person at the center of all this human error, the staff member who found those files. We don't know their name. Ofcom's report, deliberately, keeps that detail out of the public record. What we do know, from the station's own account, is almost more interesting than a name would be. This wasn't someone trying to cause chaos. It wasn't a disgruntled employee. It wasn't a leak, a prank gone wrong, or some misguided attempt at humor. It was someone doing an ordinary job, maintenance on a computer, who stumbled onto something they weren't supposed to touch and gave in to a very simple, very human impulse. Curiosity. We've all felt some version of that. A locked drawer, a folder marked "Do Not Open," a door left slightly ajar that you weren't invited through. Most of us resist, or if we don't, the consequences stay small, private, contained. This time, one moment of resisted judgment collided with a system built for one of the most sensitive events in British national life, and the result reached, however briefly, a live national audience. There's something almost unbearably relatable about that. Not the scale of the mistake, but the very human weakness underneath it, which brings us to Charles himself. Through all of this, the man at the actual center of the story, the person whose death was falsely announced to his own country, said nothing publicly at all. No statement, no acknowledgement, no wounded reaction for the cameras, just a continuing schedule of official engagements, exactly as before. It's worth remembering, briefly, the wider context surrounding Charles during this period. His cancer diagnosis, revealed publicly not long before, had already put his health under intense, near-constant public scrutiny, every appearance analyzed, every absence questioned. Against that backdrop, a false radio announcement of his death isn't just an embarrassing technical mishap. It's a strange, uncomfortable echo of exactly the kind of speculation his own family had already been trying to manage. And yet, by all public accounts, Charles carried on. Engagements continued. Life, quite literally, went on. Perhaps that, in itself, is the most fitting response available to a king in this situation. Not outrage, not comment, just the quiet, steady continuation of duty, while, elsewhere, a radio station worked out how one moment of curiosity had briefly convinced part of the country otherwise. There is something almost timeless about this story, if you step back far enough. For centuries, the death of a British monarch has been one of the most tightly managed, ceremonially precise moments in national life. Bells, flags, formal announcements, worded with extraordinary care. And in 2026, all of that careful tradition came within 30 minutes of being undone, not by war, not by scandal, not by some grand conspiracy, but by a locked folder, a maintenance check, and one person's simple wish to know what was inside. Radio Caroline survived pirate broadcasts from a ship at sea. It survived changing laws, changing technology, changing tastes in music. It will, almost certainly, survive this too, but it leaves behind a strange, quietly unsettling truth about modern Britain. Somewhere, right now, in radio stations up and down the country, there are files exactly like these, waiting, prepared, for a day none of us are in any hurry to see arrive. And the only thing standing between those files and an audience, on an ordinary Tuesday, during routine maintenance, is discipline. Just discipline. Nothing more. If you've made it this far, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell for Royal Talks TV.